Here's a polished, tighter version of your hook, 80 to 100 words, while keeping your exact energy, drama, and story direction. On a cold November night in 2024, a black Mercedes rolled to a stop outside a luxury hotel ballroom. Inside, 120 former classmates waited with champagne and a cruel plan. They believed they were about to humiliate the same girl they once called the ugliest in school, the girl they bullied, the girl who hid in the bathroom just to eat in peace, the girl they tried to erase from existence. But when she stepped out of the car in a Versace dress, diamonds glinting on her wrist, and confidence in every step, no one recognized her. And in less than 30 seconds, the people who broke her realized she was now untouchable. Tanya Bennett was the only black girl in a wealthy, mostly white private school, a place where polished shoes and perfect smiles hid something much uglier underneath. From her very first day, she stood out, not because she wanted to, but because they made sure she did. They laughed at her skin, called her too dark, whispered about her weight as she walked past. They zoomed in on her acne, her crooked teeth, her thrift store clothes, the neighborhood she came from. Every flaw they could find became a joke, a rumor, a weapon. Heather and her friends turned cruelty into sport point one morning. A carton of chocolate milk exploded down Tanya's back in the cafeteria, followed by cruel laughter and 100 eyes staring at her in silence. Another day, she discovered a new online poll created by her classmates. Vote for the ugliest girl in school. Her name sat comfortably at the top. Photos of her, unflattering, stolen, cruelly edited, spread across private group chats. And when prom season came, someone sent her a message from an anonymous admirer. For one brief moment, hope flickered inside her chest, until she arrived and found no one there. Only Heather, filming, smiling. Teachers told her to ignore it. The principal suggested she should try harder to fit in. So Tanya stopped going to the cafeteria. She locked herself in a bathroom stall during lunch, stuffing tissues over her mouth to silence the sound of her own tears. The echo of laughter from the hallway felt louder than any scream she dared not release one night. At her absolute breaking point, Tanya sat on her bed and stared down at a handful of pills. Not because she wanted to die, but because she desperately wanted the pain to stop. Then she heard her mother's voice outside her door. "Baby, you are stronger than they will ever understand." And something inside her shifted. That night, Tanya made a quiet, powerful promise to herself. One day, they would see who she really was. College wasn't just a new chapter for Tanya Bennett. That IT was an escape route. And rumors followed her there. No cruel nicknames echoed down pristine hallways. No eyes searched for flaws or reasons to laugh. For the first time in years, she could walk across a campus without shrinking into herself. She wasn't the ugly girl. She was just Tanya. She chose a university 3 states away, far enough that the ghosts of her past couldn't find her. Her freshman dorm room smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings, and the girl assigned as her roommate, Maya, greeted her with a warm smile and a simple, life-changing sentence. "You have beautiful eyes, you know that?" No one had ever said that to her before. First, Tanya didn't believe it. She laughed it off, brushing the compliment aside like a mistake. But Maya was patient, kind, persistent in the best way. She convinced Tanya to go get her skin checked by an honest dermatologist, one who explained that acne wasn't a reflection of her worth, only of her hormones and stress. Slowly, with treatment and care, her skin began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. Each fading scar felt like a small victory reclaimed from the hands of those who tried to define her. Braces corrected her teeth. A dedicated dentist fixed damage caused by years of neglect. Tanya started learning about nutrition, not to shrink her body, but to fuel it. At the campus gym, she didn't aim for perfection, only strength. Her muscles firmed. Her posture changed. She stood taller, walked differently, breathed deeper. For the first time, she wasn't punishing her body anymore. She was caring for it. And with that care came something even more powerful. Confidence. One late afternoon, as Tanya crossed the quad in a simple hoodie and jeans, lost in thought, a man approached her, holding a camera around his neck and a stunned look on his face. "Excuse me," he said, slightly out of breath, like he'd almost missed a rare opportunity. "Has anyone ever told you you could model?" Tanya thought it was a joke, but his name was Lucas Rivera, a freelance fashion photographer known for discovering raw, unconventional beauty. He asked to take a few test shots right there beneath the autumn trees. Nervous but curious, she agreed. Those few test shots changed everything. Within weeks, Tanya was attending small auditions. Within months, she walked her first local runway. People who once would have overlooked her now couldn't look away. Her walk was natural, strong, magnetic. She wasn't trying to look beautiful. She was simply being herself, and the world found it impossible to ignore. Soon came invitations. New York, then London, then Paris. She stood under the blinding lights of Fashion Week, wearing designer gowns that once would have felt like costumes. But now, they felt like armor. Cameras flashed. Designers smiled. Vogue reached out. Milan called her name. The girl who once hid in bathroom stalls was now stepping on runways where the world held its breath. Yet Tanya didn't forget where she had come from. Inside her phone, locked in a private folder, she kept every screenshot, every cruel message, every humiliating poll, every edited photo. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but as proof of how far she had come. Proof that words could wound, but resilience could rewrite any story. While the world saw her as a rising supermodel, Tanya quietly built something else behind the scenes. She enrolled in business courses, learned about branding, tech, and entrepreneurship. She partnered with investors to create a self-care and skincare startup specifically for teens who felt invisible, insecure, and broken, just like she once had. Her brand wasn't built on perfection, it was built on healing. Each product, each ad campaign, each message carried a simple truth. You are not what they called you. You are what you decide to become. By 24, Tanya Bennett wasn't just a model. She was a CEO, a speaker, a symbol, and the people who once tried to erase her existence had no idea that one day they would be the ones standing frozen, unrecognizable, staring at her outside a luxury ballroom, trying to understand how the girl they called ugly had become nothing less than unforgettable. In the spring of 2024, as Tanya Bennett reviewed contracts in her New York apartment overlooking the Hudson, an unfamiliar name slipped in her inbox. Riverside Class of 2013 Reunion. Show us who you've become. For a long moment, she simply stared at the screen. Riverside. The very name once made her stomach twist, her shoulders tense, her mind raced through dark corridors of memory. Lockers slammed, whispers coiled around her name, the echo of laughter chasing her down polished hallways. She hadn't thought about that school in years, or at least she had tried not to. But a few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a message from an old, unexpected name. Jordan Ramirez. He had been one of the quiet ones, never cruel, never kind enough to interfere, just invisible. Like Tanya had once been to Don't Go, his message read, "It's a setup." Tanya paused, her fingers hovering over the screen to Heather's organizing it. "She's been saying she's going to finish what she started. She plans to pull you on stage, joke about your past, and film the whole thing for TikTok and IG. They want you to be the punchline again." For a brief second, old fear crawled up her spine. Familiar. Cold. Real. Not because she was still that girl, but because trauma remembers, even when courage has grown. The younger Tanya, the one hiding in bathroom stalls, counting heartbeats between sobs, would have deleted the email and locked the door. But this version of Tanya was not made in a classroom or shaped by cruelty. She was built from survival, forged by discipline, strengthened by purpose, and, after a long silence, she sent 3 words that changed everything. "I'm going." Maya stared at her over a cafe table later that afternoon, disbelief shining in her eyes. "You're serious? After everything they did to you?" Tanya nodded slowly. "More than ever. Why put yourself in that room again?" Tanya looked out the window at the same city that had once seemed impossible for a girl like her to conquer. "Because I'm not walking in as the girl they remember," she said quietly. "I'm walking in as the woman they created without meaning to." The following weeks were a blur of silence and power. Tanya didn't post about the reunion. She didn't tell her followers. She didn't announce her attendance. She planned quietly, strategically, not fueled by revenge, but by something stronger. Truth. She contacted a legal team, a media coordinator, a PR consultant, not to attack, but to protect, to ensure that whatever Heather was planning, Tanya would not be unprepared. She selected a dress that spoke without screaming, elegant, bold, unforgettable. She gathered her evidence, not just screenshots and messages, but timelines, psychological reports, documentation of years-long bullying and the school's negligence. Not to destroy anyone, but to finally end the silence. The night of the reunion arrived like a held breath at a luxury hotel ballroom in the heart of the city, glowing with gold lights and false nostalgia. Former classmates sipped champagne, laughed over memories they claimed were the good old days. Heather stood at the center of it all, draped in expensive fabric and superficial charm. The queen of a kingdom built on other people's pain. A microphone rested beside the small stage, ready for a moment. They say ugly kids grow up bitter, she laughed to a small circle of friends. But sometimes you just have to remind them who they really were. A ripple of drunken laughter followed. Then, outside, a black Mercedes quietly rolled to a stop. Valets froze. Cameras from passing reporters, who had received a mysterious tip about a celebrity arrival, lifted. The door opened, and time shifted. Tanya stepped onto the pavement like a vision no one had prepared for. Versace silk hugged her figure. Diamonds caught the moonlight. Her posture was calm, tall, unshakable. Not a trace remained of the girl they had broken. She moved toward the entrance with grace so powerful it commanded silence from the sidewalk to the ceiling. Inside, murmurs began before she even entered the room. Who is that? Is she famous? That face looks familiar. Heather looked up from her conversation, annoyed by the attention pulling away from her. Her eyes narrowed toward the doors, and then they widened. Her smile cracked. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers. IT shattered against the marble floor like the echo of her collapsing reality. No, she whispered. Tanya walked in slowly, deliberately, every heel tap like a heartbeat echoing through the room. Each step erased another insult. Every breath reclaimed a memory. Conversations died mid-sentence. Laughter dissolved into nervous silence. People straightened in confusion, recognition dawning like a shockwave. That's Tanya. That can't be her. In a way. Tanya stopped just steps from Heather. The girl who once poured chocolate milk on her now stood trembling, hands shaking, eyes darting around the suddenly hushed ballroom. Tanya didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile. She simply looked at her and said calmly, "You invited me to remind me who I used to be, that I came to show you who I became in spite of you." And in that moment, the trap they had built for her closed on them instead. No one planned for the cameras to be there. In '01 expected a confrontation to unfold under crystal chandeliers and golden light. No one imagined that what was meant to be a cruel joke would become the moment truth finally tore through years of silence. But that is exactly what happened. That be why the time Tanya's words reached the far end of the ballroom, several phones were already raised. Someone whispered, "Is that being recorded?" Another whispered, "It's live." Somewhere between the back of the room and the small stage, a former classmate had clicked a button, and the world was watching. Not a reality show, not a staged viral stunt, just raw, human truth standing in heels and fire. Within hours, the clip of Tanya entering the reunion and calmly confronting her past was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. News outlets picked up the footage and replayed it in slow motion. Her walk, Heather's trembling, the shattered champagne glass, the stunned silence. The comments flooded in. This is what healing looks like. Bullies made her a queen. She didn't get revenge. She got justice. Millions of people shared it. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was familiar. Every person who had ever felt small, invisible, or broken recognized themselves in her. That BY morning, Tanya Bennett's name trended across continents. Some tried to twist the story. They said it was fake. They claimed she'd had too much work done. They accused her of using rich men, secret sponsors, paid connections at IT would have shattered the old Tanya. But the new Tanya had learned something important. Truth is louder than assumption. She did not argue. She did not insult. She did not rant. She simply posted facts that a timeline of her healing, documented visits to dermatologists, dentists, and therapists, gym progress logs across years, photos that tracked her natural change, from exhaustion to strength, from pain to power. She shared her college acceptance letter, her first modeling contract, her first startup investor meeting. She thanked everyone, even the ones who had doubted her, because doubt had become fuel. But while the world focused on Tanya, something else was happening in the shadows. Jordan had been watching quietly. The shy boy from school, the one who had warned her about the setup, worked in cybersecurity now. And as the media storm grew, so did his concern. Something didn't sit right. The reunion hadn't just been casual cruelty, that IT had been personal. Targeted. Planned too carefully to Jordan started digging. Not illegally, not obsessively. Just attentively, he traced the fake accounts that had followed Tanya online for years. Accounts that commented on nearly everything she ever posted. Accounts that watched without interacting, tried to blend in, tried to disappear. He discovered a pattern. The same writing style, the same login regions, the same digital fingerprint. And at the center of it was Heather. For 4 years, while Tanya built a life, Heather had been watching it from a distance, through screens and lies and fake identities, refusing to let go of the girl she had once tried to control. IT wasn't admiration, that IT was obsession. And when Jordan quietly reached out to others from their class, the story cracked open even wider. Point 8, more people came forward. Point 8, other former students, some younger, some older, shared similar experiences. Humiliation, isolation, online harassment, silent suffering. Not all from Heather directly, but from the same toxic social circle that had ruled the school under polished smiles. Some had left the school. Some had changed their names. Some had carried the pain into adulthood like a secret scar. Until now, one by one, their stories flooded into email inboxes, comment sections, TV interviews. New evidence surfaced. Screenshots of group chats created years ago. Emails to teachers that had been ignored. Complaints buried under reputation. And then, the biggest revelation of all, the administration had known. Teachers had submitted reports. Guidance counselors had raised concerns. Parents had demanded change. But Riverside was an elite private institution that thrived on donations and glossy rankings, and discipline didn't look good on brochures the truth had been buried. Until now. Until Tanya. Until the girl they tried to erase became impossible to ignore. Journalists swarmed. Reporters knocked on the school's doors. Investigators began requesting records. Former staff members, finally freed by public pressure, spoke on camera. The glossy walls started to crack. Students organized online petitions, demanding accountability. Alumni withdrew donations. Current parents questioned everything. In a single week, Riverside's name became a lesson in what happens when power protects cruelty. And Tanya? She didn't celebrate. She organized. She created a foundation for victims of school harassment and digital abuse. She partnered with therapists, lawyers, educators, survivors who wanted to become advocates instead of statistics. She spoke at conferences, at universities, on global stages, not as a model, but as a voice. "I am not special," she told a packed auditorium. "I'm just the one who didn't give up, and there are millions like me still waiting to be heard." Her words were shared across classrooms, across timelines, across nations. Girls who had once whispered started speaking. Boys who had once laughed started apologizing. Teachers who once ignored started intervening. Tanya Bennett was no longer just a survivor of bullying. She was a movement wrapped in elegance, strength, and truth. The same world that once judged her face now studied her words. And in every corner of the internet, one comment echoed louder than the rest. They tried to break her, but instead they built a revolution. The headlines moved fast. Former bully fired after reunion scandal. Riverside School under criminal investigation. Institution issues official apology for negligence. Heather lost her job within days. Sponsors and partners cut ties. Friends who had once laughed beside her now disappeared into silence. The social crown she had worn for years cracked and fell without ceremony. And as officials began combing through old records, interviews, and digital archives, Riverside finally released a formal apology, not just to Tanya, but to every student who had suffered in its walls without protection, that a criminal investigation opened quietly but firmly. Justice had begun to move, but Tanya didn't feel victorious. There was no celebration, no sense of triumph, no champagne, no speeches about revenge. She watched it all unfold from the quiet of her apartment, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, listening to the rain tap against the windows. She didn't feel happiness for their downfall. She felt something else. Responsibility. "I don't want them to just remember what happened to me," she told Jordan softly during a phone call. "I want them to remember what should never happen again." And with that, the Ugly Duckling Fund was born. Not as a brand, not as a headline, but as a lifeline. The foundation focused on scholarships for students who have been bullied, isolated, silenced, especially children of color, children from struggling homes, children who have been told they were less than just because they didn't fit into someone else's narrow version of beauty or worth at IT-covered therapy sessions. School transfers, medical care, self-defense training, college tuition, but most importantly, it covered hope. Letters began arriving from everywhere, from small towns, from big cities, from countries Tanya had never been to, handwritten notes with trembling ink, emails typed through tears, messages from young girls hiding in bathrooms, from boys who had been shoved in hallways, from kids who were standing on the edge between giving up and holding on. "You saved my life. I didn't do it because I saw you. I thought I was ugly. Now I think I was just surrounded by ugly hearts." Each letter hit her deeply, and every time, Tanya remembered that cold stall, the flickering light, the chipped tiles beneath her fingers, the sound of her own breath breaking into silence. For years, she had thought that version of her was weak. Now she realized something extraordinary. That girl had been braver than she ever knew. She had stayed. She had endured. She had chosen one more day when it mattered most. And now that choice was rippling outward into thousands of other lives. During the first official event for the Ugly Duckling Fund, Tanya stood on a small stage facing a room filled with scholarship recipients. Some shy, some nervous, some still carrying the same kind of pain she once did. She looked into their faces and saw herself. Not the model, not the CEO, not the public figure, just the child who had wanted someone to tell her she mattered. "You don't need to become famous to prove them wrong," she told them warmly. "You don't need designer clothes, perfect skin, or millions of followers. The most powerful thing you will ever do is refuse to disappear." The room rose in applause, but Tanya barely heard it. Inside, something finally settled. That frightened girl wasn't gone. She was healed. She was honored. She was finally seen. Not because she became beautiful, not because she became rich, but because she chose to stay and turned her pain into a purpose powerful enough to save others. They tried to turn her into a joke. Instead, she became a revolution. Tanya Bennett's story isn't just a glow-up. It's what happens when a broken child refuses to disappear and survives long enough to become unstoppable. Somewhere right now, a lonely kid is sitting in a school bathroom, staring at the floor, wondering if anyone would notice if they vanished. This story is for them. You are not invisible. You are not ugly. You are not alone. Point one day. The world will see you in the way it failed to. Before, and when that day comes, you won't need revenge. Your success will speak for you.